Well, Syrian officials say that since President Ahmed al-Sharaa seized power in December, hundreds of Alawites have been forced out of their homes. This comes as the government is again dealing with sectarian violence, as clashes continue between Islamists and members of the Druze ethnic minority. For more on this, I'm joined by Middle East correspondent Tlozek. Hi there, Eric. Now, we have seen hundreds of Alawites killed in March, and there are credible reports of many in the community being evicted from their homes. Are we now seeing a minority effectively persecuted because they are from the same sect as the former dictator Bashar al-Assad?
That's certainly what the Alawites themselves are saying, Girish. These evictions appear to be taking place in Damascus, the capital. And the government's response to criticism is that they are evicting residents who were in government housing. In the former regime, Alawites did make up a large proportion of the civil service, particularly senior positions, also in the army and the intelligence services. And the government says that if people are being evicted, it is from government housing because they are no longer employed by the new Syrian government. But that doesn't seem to be the case with all the evictions. There's also the potential, and some of the general security services of the new government who've been asked about this have said they are evicting families that were part of the Shabiha. The Shabiha were a notorious kind of paramilitary organisation, not a formal organisation affiliated with the government, but kind of a thuggish, almost organised crime type group that was used to suppress groups within the Syrian revolution. It was used to suppress opposition, demonstrators, worked with the intelligence services. So there could be an element of retribution in some of these evictions as well. And of course, it could be targeting ordinary Alawite families who happen to live in those neighbourhoods and weren't involved in the previous regime's repression, but are simply Alawites and, are being caught up in this because the government is trying to move its people into these areas now.
So in that vein, is there a sense that sectarian violence will ensue for some time and escalate?
It's always been the great fear in Syria. Many Syrians will tell you they want an inclusive, unified country, but Syria has had episodes of sectarian conflict throughout its history. And the great fear of the Syrian revolution was that, it could devolve into a sectarian conflict. That was certainly the fear of Alawites who were supporting the president and who were afraid that if the revolution succeeded, then they would be victimised. Certainly some Christians were afraid of this. Not to mention, there were, of course, Alawites who supported the revolution and Christians as well. Syria is very complex politically. But that was the fear that minorities in Syria would be persecuted if a Sunni majority government, particularly a hardline Islamist one, was to win out in the revolution. So that is what's playing out now in Syria, a great fear amongst minority communities. Alawites have told us they're very afraid. They've suffered losses in terms of family members being killed. Now they're afraid for their homes and property. They're also afraid about ongoing persecution if they remain in Syria. And it's not just the Alawites who are worried. Some Christians are worried as well, and the Druze minority in the south.
Yes, and as you mentioned, the interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa has promised unity during this time and not to target any particular group. But that begs the question of what's the degree of control he has over the now members of Syria's security forces.
Well, the General Security Services have themselves admitted that during those killings of Alawites in the mountains and coast in March, that members of the security services and civilian fighters who were supposedly under their control did commit extrajudicial killings, did murder or are alleged to have murdered civilians, Alawite civilians, in those 4 or 5 days of killings that took place in that area. And so the GSS has apparently arrested around 30 people for those extrajudicial killings that took place in that time. So the human rights groups in Syria estimate around 900 civilians were killed during that violence. And a number of those were killed, in fact, by what they call filul, or remnants of the former regime's military. But the greater number were allegedly killed by people associated with the new Syrian security services. So it says it has arrested 30 people in response to that. But there are elements of it about which there are serious concerns, jihadist elements that come from places like Uzbekistan, for example, and, you know, the Turkish-backed rebel elements that are Sunni, hardline Sunni Islamist. There are questions about how much control the new government has over them and whether they'll listen when the new president urges them to exercise restraint against minority communities.
Eric, separately, we've seen, you know, Israel focusing attacks on Damascus, claiming that it is protecting the Druze community, which you spoke about earlier. Can you explain to us why Benjamin Netanyahu is ordering attacks against the pro-government forces that are battling Druze fighters?
Well, publicly, Israel is saying this is because they have a large Druze population in the north of Israel, and also which they administer in the occupied Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory occupied by Israel for many decades. But it does appear to have a greater goal in mind for Israel, which is that since the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad in December last year, Israeli troops moved further into Syria and have occupied parts of the south in excess of the Golan Heights. And the main population in those areas is Druze. And the Israeli government has indicated it does not want to give up that land, and it's also been seeking to weaken the new Syrian government militarily. So it looks like these attacks on Damascus and on regime troops that have been fighting with the Druze are designed to court the support of the Druze for an ongoing and prolonged Israeli occupation of those parts of southern Syria. The majority population, as I mentioned, in those areas is Druze, and Israel is hoping that influential Druze leaders will ask for Israeli protection and legitimise Israel's ongoing occupation of those areas. Not all the Druze in southern Syria are buying it. In fact, many Druze leaders are critical of Israel's intervention. They say it makes them a target for reprisals by the Sunni majority and the new government in Syria. Senior Druze leaders have actually signed a deal with Ahmed al-Sharaa, the new Syrian president, to cooperate with the new government. And, you know, they're worried that Israel's intervention will further destabilise Syria and lead to more sectarian conflict. And this is actually something figures within the Israeli government have said they want. The Israeli position from people like Bezalel Smotrich, one of the far-right ministers in the cabinet, is that Syria should remain divided and weak. And many of Israel's interventions are being viewed as attempts to ensure the new government is not only militarily weak, but is constantly trying to put out sectarian spot fires rather than solidifying its rule.
Yes, and then finally, do you think this, if Israel continues its offensive on across the border on Syrian soil, that it might draw Syria further into the broader conflict in Gaza?
So Syria, the new Syrian government, interestingly, has not, to my knowledge, attacked Israel at all. In fact, Ahmed al-Sharaa, the new president, has made it clear that he does not want any conflict with Israel, much to the disappointment of people who hoped that Syria would, you know, be a defender of the Palestinian cause. Ahmed al-Sharaa has made a tactical decision and a long-term strategic one, as he's seeking for sanctions to be lifted on Syria, to make sure that he is offering no threat to Israel. Syria has not responded to the many Israeli attacks, and the new Syrian government, despite copping a pounding from Israeli jets and Israeli artillery, has not attacked Israel, and it's not sought to be involved in the Gaza conflict at all. The reasons for that are politically sound in terms of, you know, the new government trying to establish itself and rebuild the economy and seek sanctions relief. But it is putting Syria in a difficult position with the rest of the Arab world, you know, in terms of, you know, watching the ongoing conflict in Gaza. But I think most people understand the Syrian government's decision, and it does make it harder for Israel to justify its ongoing attacks on the new Syrian regime.
Okay, Middle East correspondent Tlozek, appreciate as always your reporting. Thank you so much.